Max, just don't intro me again. That was the longest thing I did not.
You want me to do a whole nother intro?
For that. I was like,
all right. Hey, everyone. We're back. Thank you all so much for being so patient. Thankfully, Jane was able to get some headphones on. We won't be having that problem anymore. So I will go ahead and stop talking now and let them do their thing. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So before we start, Jane, I just wanted to say how thrilled I am to be with you today. And everyone, I'm so excited to speak with Jane about her new book. Jane Smiley, of course, is one of our most important authors. She's an amazing prose writer. And her new book is magical. I love it so much. I've read it multiple times, and I can't wait.
Multiple times?
I've read it multiple times. I love this book. And I interviewed Jane for Publishers Weekly, and we spoke about the book, and she knows how much I love it already. So I'll resist repeatedly.
Yes, you were very sweet.
But it's hard not to. So Jane, thank you so much for doing this. And where do we start? I mean, let's start at the top. What inspired the story about a runaway horse in Paris?
Well, the runaway horse in Paris is my horse. And she never got to Paris. I know she'd like to. And she was a racehorse for a while. Didn't do much. I think she was second to last once. And but she's a curious horse.
And her name was Paris too, right? Just like the Paris.
Her name is Perestroika. And she's a curious horse, and I love riding her. And I was in Paris, and I'd been visiting a friend of mine who was a horse trainer in Paris. And I was eating French onion soup on the west side of the Seine. And I thought, wouldn't that be fun? And so, of course, I had to go back and do lots and lots of research. Especially for the onion soup,
For the onion soup, a lot of culinary research. Your love of animals is on full display in this book. You have so many fantastic animals in this book. Of course, there's Paris, the curious filly, but there's also Frida, that wonderful melancholy dog. We have opinionated Raoul the raven. We have bickering mallards. We have a lovesick rat. How did you decide which animals to put into this story, to incorporate into this story? And how did you choose them, and tell us about the animals?
Well, once I had the horse, I knew she needed a dog as a serve as her protector. The others just sort of came along. Once when I was visiting the Eiffel Tower, I saw mallards in the ponds. And I thought, okay, those are interesting. They're very good looking. So I looked up mallards, and it turned out they were quite interesting. The raven, I would have to say, just presented himself. He said, come on, this is my book. This is my book. Once you got inside the house that belongs to the Madame de Mornay, I thought, well, the logical thing is that there are a couple of rats. And so I included the rats. Those are the fun, or the most fun in the way, because I'd never had any fondness for rats, but I thought, why not?
What sort of research did you do about animals? Because your animals they're so vivid, and they definitely have personalities. Very vivid.
Well, I did the normal kind of research where you look up and see what the characteristics of certain animals are and how they form family groups and what they do. In some ways, the one I knew least about was the raven. And so when I started looking up the nature of ravens, that was really fascinating to me. But I didn't know much about mallards either. So I just did the research. I love doing research. Research always makes me more curious and more interested in whatever it is that I'm working on.
And Frida, the German Shorthair, who's a companion to Paris, is that based on your own dog also?
Yeah.
Could you tell us about?
She's passed away at this point. But she was a horse dog also. I was at a horse show in our neighborhood, big horse show. And this woman walked by and she had this beautiful German Shorthair. And she said that the German Shorthair was looking for a home. And I said, I'll take her. Well, it turned out that her owner had chickens, and apparently she had killed a couple of the chickens. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, she was about a year. And so she came to live with us, and the other dogs that we had at the time quite liked her. They were Jack Russells. They liked her.
This book, how would you tell us, how would you qualify this? This is a modern fairy tale. It's a fantasy for adults. How do you see this book?
It's a good time. You know, I don't really think in terms of genres. I think in terms of what might be a good story. And as soon as I sort of put this one together, I thought, well, this might be a good story, and why not? The trilogy, the Last 100 Years trilogy, was very realistic. And I had to follow the last 100 years of history as closely as I could. And there was no real room for any fantasy or ideas that were, say, really imaginary. And so this was a nice change from that.
And how do you think about a book like this, a fantasy for adults, something, well, I mean, it reminds me of another book about a horse, Black Beauty, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a book that started out really as an adult fantasy, right? And then it became something that was read by kids.
Well, the interesting thing about Black Beauty was that Anna Sewell wrote it in order to show the terrible conditions that horses had, or a lot of horses had to live under in her day. And she wanted to change it. It was a political book. I read it as a child. I didn't understand that then, but I do remember reading it when I was reading it. And when Ginger falls to her knees on the cobbles, I burst into tears. And, you know, I reread it a few years ago and I did this exact same thing. I burst into tears. So it became a children's book because the issues around horses and the treatment of horses as carriage drawing, you know, working animals, those changed. And so we lost that sense of its politics, but it started out as political. And I wouldn't say that my book is political at all. I don't have anything to criticize the French for example.
This book has no real bad guy, at least no bad guy in the center. Tell me about that choice to write a book that didn't have that being at the center of it.
Well, given who they are and what's going on, life is the bad guy. That's the antagonist. They have to make their way. They have to figure out how to eat, how to survive, how to get what they want, especially the rat. He really wants a mate. So, and the old lady, she's 96 years old. She has issues with Etienne,
which is the boy, the
Yeah.
boy in the book. I don't know if,
and they're not issues
everyone has
about
read the
he
book yet.
disagrees with her or things, but she knows she's gonna not live very long. And she hasn't figured out how to take care of him after she's gone. And she keeps thinking about it and then putting it aside. So I would say for her especially, but also for the others, it's dealing with the regular aspects of life that is the struggle.
Right. And you famously work on more than one book at a time. Well, rather you rotate, I should say, but that's part of your incredible talent, is that you're able to juggle multiple projects. And if I'm not mistaken, you had at least one other book that you could have published this year, but you wanted to publish this one. And I think you said that it might be a good book for this moment in our history for 2020. Can you speak more?
What I was thinking of was the election. I wasn't thinking that COVID would pop up or anything like that. But I thought it might be a nice little distraction from a chaotic election. And the publisher agreed. And so we decided to do it then.
Because it's such an uplifting book. It's such a, I said it to you before, it's like it's written in the air. There's like an effortlessness to it. It's so beautiful and magical. Did it feel like that in the writing? Did it give you that kind of comfort?
Yes. Making stuff up is a lot of fun. And having to adhere to some rules, but not all the rules, that's a lot of fun. So when I was writing the trilogy, there was a lot of stuff I had to adhere to make the history correct and the way farming is changed correct and all of that stuff. But this, all I had to do was make the animals moderately believable.
Well, they're very believable.
Oh, thank you.
I was completely invested in the animals. And this is sort of a bit of a return to the world of, it is a return to the world of horses after a year at the races and Horse Heaven. And of course, you have 2 young adult series about horses. What is it about the horse that makes it such a good subject for you, for your writing?
Well, they're very idiosyncratic and they're complex. And if you're on top of them, then your safety depends on understanding something, especially if you aren't terribly, what's the word I'm looking for? Adept, such as me. And so I have bred the horses that I ride. And watching them from foalhood to grow up and what kind of riding horses they become has been totally fascinating. And so it's just the next step to give them their own life, to give them some freedom and see what happens.
How long were you researching this book and writing it?
Well, you'd have to check my travel budget to see how many times I went to Paris. But I have to say, I started it in 2009, and I just went to it and back to it and to it and back to it.
And what did you discover about Paris that you hadn't known over the course of your research?
You mean Paris? Paris,
Paris, not your horse, not the character, but the city, or Hey, or your horse.
Well, the West Side, the Passy, is so beautiful and dramatic because it's up on a steep hill that it sweeps down to the river, and there are interesting streets to walk around on. There was one place I went down a staircase, and somebody said, "Oh, that's where Charles Dickens and his mistress lived." So is that true? I have no idea. Another highway or street on the other side of the Seine, but not too far away, is the Avenue Émile Zola. And he's one of my favorite writers. So it was fun to walk around down his street. And it was just fun.
And when you write a book that you like writing so much, that gives you so much pleasure, how hard or easy is it to say goodbye? I mean, you've written so much, so you're used to waving goodbye to characters, but was this extra sad, ending this story? I guess this is my roundabout way of asking if there'll be a sequel, because I never want these characters to go away. But I am wondering, what it's like emotionally to work within a story like this and then to finish it.
Well, it varies from book to book. Some books I've gotten sort of tired of them before I finished them. Some books I've just have stayed with me, like the Greenlanders.
Mm-hmm.
I finished it.
Your 14th century.
Yeah. I finished it. I sent it away, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. Oddly enough, the trilogy, it was like those characters, I was very fond of them. I loved following them through their 100 years. But when it was finished, I just said, see you later. I didn't care about leaving them behind. So it just varies from book to book and probably mood to mood. I don't know exactly what's going on.
Was this
but
one of the?
I have to tell you that my trainer and I were talking about a sequel, and it's because Paris is in a stall that is next to a horse who's younger but looks quite a bit like her, and then next to that horse, that mare, is a gelding who's huge. He's a French warm blood, and he's enormous. And so my trainer and I said, okay, what if Paris and the French warm blood decide to have an affair? That would be a very French thing to do. And maybe they could head out into the countryside. But the other mare would be screaming the whole time. So so it could be a very sad, threesome issue.
Some sort of drama, menage a trois, family drama.
He's a gelding. They wouldn't be able to produce any children.
Well, you could still argue. So you ride pretty much every day, right? You've been riding your entire life. How is riding? Does it help your writing? Does riding help your writing at all?
Yes, it definitely does. Because quite often I'll be writing. I always write first thing in the day. And sometimes I'll get stuck. And so I'll just go to the barn and get on a horse. And then there'll be an idea that crosses my mind while I'm on the horse, because I'm not thinking really about what I was writing. I'm just sort of doing other things. So the idea will come. Then the real issue is, will I remember the idea, or should I pull my phone out and leave myself a message or whatever? But yeah, I find that writing is very good. One of my favorite writers is Anthony Trollope. And he loved fox hunting, and he wrote every single day. And I'm sure that he liked to get away from it and to get out into the horse country and to go fox hunting and do all that stuff. I'm sure that it gave him the energy to go back the next day and write some more. I would be totally surprised if it didn't.
And what is your writing routine? I know people always want to know that of you. I guess they just want your secrets. I know I do, whatever they may be.
Open the computer, go get the Diet Coke, read what I wrote yesterday aloud to my husband, correct spelling errors if I find them, and then see what he has to say about what I wrote, whether he understands it or whether he thinks something is missing, and then fix that and then go on.
And do you read to him every day from your pages?
Yeah. If I wrote something the previous day, I read it to him.
Oh. And how many hours are you writing a day?
Oh, probably 2.
2. And you're
just a second, I'm gonna cough.
And you're going from like book to, you'll work on something for a while and then put it down, and then will it be like for months you'll be working on something, and then, or is it weeks?
Usually it's about 2 or 3 months, and then I'll come to a place where I just don't understand it, and I'll set it aside.
Because how many books right now do you have on the table?
I would say 4.
Wow.
But for one of them, I only have about 4 pages. For one of them, is complete, just needs to be rewritten. And for 2 of them, I have about 40,000 words.
Wow. And you don't do this
what
without
else
coffee.
am I gonna do? I live in the country. There's nothing to do
know.
except go to the store, and can't do that. So go to the barn, go to the store,
visit the horses, write 4 books at a time, no big deal. And all without coffee. Diet Coke is the drink.
Yeah.
So you told me when we spoke for the Publishers Weekly article, you told me a great story about talking or employing the services of an animal communicator. And I know your fans will want to hear about this. And somebody who tells you, or I guess you could explain it better, but will tell you what your horse is thinking. An animal communicator, somebody who
supposedly.
And you
so
enjoy listening to
that
these.
You just do it. Yeah.
So how many times have you used an animal communicator to find out what you have 3 horses, right? Mm-hmm. What one of your horses is thinking, and what are your horses thinking?
Maybe 5 or 6 or 7, a few more. But I'll tell you a Paris story with regard.
Yeah, right.
So where Paris and Ned, her friend, and who's 2 years younger than she is, also a racehorse, and he's in the children's series, the 3-volume children's series. So they were turned out overnight in huge corrals with big, tall iron pipe fences. And one morning, the groom showed up, and Ned was not in the pipe. He was outside the pipe walking around. And he had some scrapes on his front legs. Now, the pipes were over 5 feet high. And so I called the animal communicator, and I'd never tell her what I'm talking about. I said something like, you know, Ned did something really strange lately. And she said, okay, I'll think about it. She said, do you mean he jumped out of the corral? I said, yes. And I said, what does he say about that? And he said, well, it wasn't that hard. And then she said, do you want to hear what Paris has to say about it? I said, sure. And she said, well, Paris says he does it all the time. Out and in, out and in. I knew she was lying through her teeth. But she was trying to, you know, get him in trouble. But that was our weirdest animal communicator episode.
But didn't she once tell you that Paris wanted to live in your house? And in fact,
Yes.
the Paris in your book goes to live with, much of a spoiler, at some point goes to live with the boy in the book.
Yeah.
Did you?
She did. I said too many stairs.
Did
I can figure that out.
Yeah. Did the idea to make the character in the book live with the boy have anything to do with what you learned from the animal communicator about Paris's true intentions, true desires?
No, what it had to do with was when I was his age, I wanted a horse to live in the house with me. So I decided he could live the dream.
Wow. And you write, of course, for both adults and kids. You've written a children's book and you write young adult series. Is there a difference between, or what is the difference between writing for kids and adults? Do you get into a different mindset? Walk us through that, what that's like.
Well, the books I've written for young adults and older children have been horse books. And they're really about what a child should know and can learn from riding and learning to ride. So those books are kind of like teaching books. Adult books aren't teaching books. They're more like exploring books. Books where I explore opinions and thoughts and characters and ideas.
But you're not getting into a different, like a kid's mindset versus an adult. Because I wonder about this book in particular, because it has so many playful elements, and it is one that will appeal to both older kids and, of course, adults. I mean, it transcends like that. So I was wondering if you were thinking about that at all while you were writing.
Not really. Getting into a kid's mindset is pretty easy because the kids I write about are either, 10, 11, or 13, 14. I remember what it was like to be those ages really well. And so and I've also had kids of my own, and I remember what it was like to watch kids of those ages. So I don't think getting into a kid's mindset is as hard as, say, getting into the mindset of a very, very old person. Because I've experienced being a kid and having kids.
Do you have a genre that you enjoy writing more than another? Like, do you satire versus drama versus anything else? Because you write so many different kinds of books. And I think that's what makes you especially extraordinary. I mean, people can't master one genre, much less to do what you do.
Probably the ones that I enjoyed the most were the funny ones.
Yeah, because you're really funny. You have a great sense of humor. And in this book is very funny. This new book is very funny. I mean, you just have to read the Mallards arguing with each other.
I loved writing Moo. I loved writing the Greenlanders. But everything is just offers a different puzzle. And I loved writing this book, actually. But everything offers a different puzzle. And the ones that have been hardest are probably the ones that I've learned the most from. But I had to have a sort of a feeling of grit to keep going on those. But then at the end, I liked them. So.
What was the hardest? What were some of the more challenging?
Oh, the hardest was Private Life. And I think it was because I just didn't understand the male character very well. I didn't know how to betray a guy who's has no emotions. I just didn't know how to do it. And so I had to think about it and think about it and think about it. And in the end, I was happy with what we came up with. But it was very difficult.
And was this one of your favorite books to write?
Oh, gosh, yes. It really was. I enjoyed every minute of it.
I think, too, it was one of your husband's favorite books, right?
Yeah.
He's one of your first readers, so.
Yeah, he loved it from day one. So I took that as my first review.
Yeah. How long does it take you into the writing process to realize or to feel like, okay, I'm onto something. I have something here that I'm really excited about?
Well, that varies from book to book, I have to say. I don't have any expectations really about how long it's going to take. Some things take a lot of research and others don't. And you have to do a sufficient amount of research to know what you're talking about and to know what else you need to know. So it just varies from book to book.
How has 2020 been for you as a writer? How has it treated you this year?
Well, it all depends on my publisher. They've been wonderful. Went ahead with the book, made a beautiful cover, just made a lovely book out of it. And they've been great with me. And so as a professional writer, 2020 has been fine. But I've also had a lot of time at home. And so I've enjoyed working on the other projects that I have going.
And they did put out a beautiful book. One of the things I love so much and appreciate as a reader is this beautiful map that they did. Now, how involved were you in creating that? How did that come about? Because it's such a great addition.
Well, they just sent me various drafts of it, and I would say, well, this is where this place is, and this is where that place is. But I didn't have any criticism of the map. I thought it was a lovely map. Same with the cover.
Yeah, the cover is beautiful, and like I said, the map is fantastic. So you said you were there like 4 or 5 times, right? Over the course
Paris, yeah.
To Paris, yeah. When's the last time you were there? Because right now it's such a great to have a book like this when we can't travel, so you can really.
Excuse me. I was there about a year ago, maybe a little longer. It was after the fire at the cathedral, and I was going to a book thing in Versailles, and they put me up at a hotel near the Bastille on the east side. And I had a wonderful walk from there through the Botanic Garden and then across over to the west side. That was a great, fun time.
That area that you write about in the book, the park and stuff, is that different now? because I thought, if I'm not mistaken, I think
Yeah.
like it's changed, right?
Yes, it is somewhat different. They've changed the stuff around the pond and the stuff around the Eiffel Tower. But the far end is basically the same. But the part where the horses and the mallards and where they are, that's changed.
When you're writing a book that relies so much, I mean, it's these animals observing people and observing their habits and waiting for them to maybe drop some food or, figure out, how they can survive in bustling Paris. Do you sit like, when you're trying to write scenes like that and trying to write them from the animal's perspective, what sort of research is that? Are you sitting on any Paris park benches and watching the world go by and trying to put yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course. But one of the things I always love is eavesdropping. And so if you eavesdrop enough, you'll hear something interesting.
What's the last thing you heard that was interesting? Eavesdropping. Okay.
I should have been prepared for that question. I can't say.
Probably. Well, tell me when you realized that you were a writer. How young were you when you got the bug to write?
I would say I was a senior in high school. When I was a senior in high school, we had a 2-week vacation every spring. And for some reason, my parents let me go to London for 2 weeks and stay with some colleagues of my stepfather. And they lived near Marble Arch. And they showed me all around and I explored London. And then when I came home, I wrote my senior paper, it's not a dissertation, but it's my senior thesis about my trip. And I loved it. I loved the trip. I loved writing about it. And I just thought, this is great. So I stuck with it and took creative writing classes and took other classes too.
And what do you hope that people, what do you hope happens with this book? What do you hope people get out of it?
Pleasure.
Yeah.
That's it.
And the feedback you've gotten from your husband, I know your editor, your agent, and anybody I spoke with, everybody says that it's one of their favorite books, if not their favorite.
Of mine?
Of yours, yeah.
That's fine. It's up for the readers. Reader gets to choose. I mentioned Anthony Trollope before, but one of his books is called He Knew He Was Right. And that was one of his least favorite books. And it is my favorite because it's so brilliant in its characterization of the main character and also the main female character. And so the writer just hands them out. It's the reader who decides which one they like. Well,
it seems like a perfect book for right now. What is Paris, the real Paris, doing right now? What has she been up to? Give us an update.
Well, she's had some issues. She had some allergies, and she has had a couple of issues with her hocks. So she's mostly up to living the life of leisure and teasing the other horses, I think. But she has a beautiful stall. It's great big. She can walk back and forth in it. And it has a lot of views that she can look at. So it's a good stall. And she gets lots of treats and she gets lots of walks. And so We'll hope she gets back to normal.
Does she know that she's the center of, or she inspired the character in your book?
Well, I'll
Has
tell
she seen
one
the
last story. The other day, I was leading her around in a little walk, and a friend of mine walked past, and I said, "Oh, I want to give you one of the books," but the book was in my car, and the cars were close together, so I handed my friend the lead rope, and I went over and got the book, and I turned around and I held the book up, and here came Paris. What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? We just laughed and laughed. And I said, "Yeah, you're famous. So, that's good."
She wanted to read it. That's going to be her new thing.
I hope so. I hope so.
Maybe Max, if you want to chime in, I don't know if he's with us, but he was maybe going to go through some of the audience questions with us. Max, are you around somewhere? We've lost Max.
Yeah, I'm here.
Max, are there any audience questions for Jane?
Yeah, there are a few audience questions.
Okay,
I can go ahead and read those out for you, Jane.
Let's go.
Yeah. So this one is from Mary Margaret Sunker. And the question is, she's wondering if there was any inspiration for any of the human characters.
Oh, good question.
No, I wouldn't say so. They just sort of popped into my mind. I knew some of them had to exist, like the woman who is baking and the guy who takes care of the Champ de Mars. But mostly they just sort of popped into my mind.
Okay, and I'm personally just curious, how easy was it for you to just like come up with these people that you say that you had to come up with? Was it a task at all, or was it just you did it super quick and that was it?
Well, the idea of the baker came because I was walking down that Avenue de Suffren, and I saw a pastry shop, and I thought, oh, that's where she needs to eat, so that's where she could get some grain and some oats. And so then that idea came up. And then on the other side of the Champ de Mars, I was walking down one of the streets and I saw a vegetable shop. And so I figured, well, she needs some carrots and some other vegetables too. So that's how that idea came up.
That's great. We have another question from David Francis, and they say, I love the idea.
David Francis
so
is
you
one of
know
my best
David
friends.
Francis.
I'm really
Perfect.
curious about what this one's going to be.
They said, I love the idea of a romantic sequel, but I imagine it would inevitably get sad. Now that you've written a book that is such a joy, and I imagine a joy to write, do you hunger for more stories of such pure love and hope? And do you want to do more of it?
I don't seek out anything from a story. It's more like the story finds me. Something interesting comes to me, and then it has to play out in a logical way. So I don't know. The ones I'm working on now, they're not that happy.
Do you cry while you're writing? If it's
Sometimes,
something that's like,
sure, of course. Yeah.
So it doesn't look like we have any more audience questions. I will once again remind the audience that you can ask Jane questions if you'd like. But we do have about 10 minutes left. Elaine, if you have anything else you would like to ask or discuss, feel free to do so.
Well, I just want to
but
make
if not,
sure that we're covering everything Jane wants to talk about. Jane, is there anything that we haven't asked that you, or that people don't ask you about this book, or any book that you're like, I wish people would ask me that? That is.
No, people ask all kinds of questions, and I don't know.
What do they ask? What do you get most often? What questions do you get most often?
It's usually about how did a particular idea come to me, and how did I develop it, and what did I think about it before I did it compared to after I did it. And so that's a question that I'm used to.
In this book, it was very clever how you figured out how to, for example, Frida bringing her bag, her money and her money to the grocer, and then them sort of negotiating, figuring out that, like, I thought it was really clever that what she needed, and then him giving it to her, and then him assuming that she was the dog of the old woman, which I thought that was really clever, because it solved the problem of why does this dog keep returning. When you were, how hard was it to, and also like the scenes where the horse is in the house and trying to delicately figure out, like how to have a horse in the house and it not be noticed and all of that. How long were you, when you're thinking about like trying to solve problems like that, did you work through them for a long time, or was this stuff just kind of coming to you like readily?
Well, mostly I just had to picture the house and picture how the horse would get in and what it would take to learn how to get in. So when she first goes in, there can't be too many steps, and the door also has to be wide enough for her hips to get through.
Right.
Once she's inside the house, I can imagine it as a big house, and so I can imagine her being able to be in there. The real question is, where is she going to deposit her manure?
Right.
So I had her mistakenly sort of bang the door, and then Etienne opens the door and she goes outside, and he praises her when she deposits the manure out there. And so she realizes that's where she's supposed to do it. And so it's that kind of thing, step by step.
I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't read it yet, but I will say that I loved all of the writing, but there was something so beautiful and delicate about how you handled, there's a scene between the great grandmother in her bed and the rat coming in to try to figure out what's going on with her, whether she's breathing or not breathing. And it's so beautiful that I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you that it was, when we talked earlier about, crying while reading or writing something, that was something that really, it moved me. That was
in a lot of ways,
level.
this house is a rat paradise, because there's only two people in it, and the woman,
one of them is almost blind, so is dropping crumbs.
yes. And also, she has lived through lots of years of no provisions. And so she's always stocking up. She's always stocking up. And then she and the boy don't eat very much. So for rats, wow, all they have to do is chew their way into this bag or that bag or get into the food. And these rats are actually quite fat. So it's a good place for a rat.
So we do have a few more audience questions, Jane, if you would like to hear them. So this one's from Julie. And the question is, all my horses and dogs have had distinct personalities. Do you base your animals' characters on your animals, or are you able to create them out of thin air?
Well, this horse and dog are based on my animals. And in Horse Heaven, one of the horses was based on mine. So it varies. Sometimes I base it on my horses or dogs, sometimes I base it on ones that I see and have watched. It just depends on the plot, which ones I'm going to stick in here and there.
Yeah. The next question is from Jackie. I like this one. The question is, what do Parisians have to say about your book?
I have no idea. I did give it to my French translator to find out, and she really loved it. And she lives in Paris, though she lives on the east side. And so I took that as a go ahead. So we'll see what the other Parisians think about it.
When does it come out there? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Because you have so many,
I'm not sure.
foreign markets where it's being published. Yeah. Well, that'll be exciting.
But if they don't like it, I'll blame her.
That's right. They're going to love it. I mean, who's not going to love this book?
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a great book. I think we will go ahead and wrap it up there. Jane, you were incredible. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Elaine, you were just as delightful. Everyone in the audience, you were. Yeah,
that's really great.
Make sure you read Jane's book if you haven't. You can go ahead and buy it from our store by clicking that green button.
This book will make you happy.
It will.
This book will make you happy.
It made me happy.
Yeah.
Jane, Elaine, thank you so much. Everybody for coming. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have a good night and a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Max. Bye, Jane. Congratulations on your book. We love it.
Thank you. Thank you,